are listening to Against the Herd. Welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody out there is doing really well. As you see, I'm by myself again today. In the future, it'll either be probably Sean or Liz with me, but today it's just me and my guest who's with me. I have Luca from the Justified Belief podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a while, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Steve, man. Thank you for having me on. I think it's going to be a real awesome conversation, brother.
I'm super excited, man. I got to listening to your podcast. Actually, it was funny because the way I found your podcast is I was looking up biblical archaeology, and you have one episode specifically on that. And that's how I found you. That's what I put in the search, and you popped up.
Oh, perfect. I'm glad to see it's working.
But I went through, listened to it, and like I said, it was pretty spot on. I would encourage anybody out there to jump in, take a listen to Luca on the Justified Belief podcast. He has a few other guests and a few other shows where he gets together with a few other people, and man, it's just good content, good conversation, and you'll definitely have your cup filled up. I'm telling you. So jump in and listen to the Justified Belief podcast. But before we get started and go any further, Luca, I'd love for you to pray with us, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for just blessing us with this podcast here and this ability to just share your word. Lord, we ask that you just speak through us, help us to speak in truth, Lord, and speak in accordance with your will, and start sowing those seeds of the gospel to all those who need to hear it and to all those who want to hear it and have a firmer ground to stand on. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen to that. All right. Well, we're going to jump in, and this isn't just jumping in like, we're tiptoeing in the shallow end. We're going to jump on the diving board in the deep end of the pool here. And this is an Olympic size pool. So there's going to be some big eyes when they first hear this topic here, but we all have been seeing things on the news lately about the Epstein files and all this stuff coming out and down the road about, are people going to be prosecuted, all this stuff. But just like our government loves to do, all of a sudden there's something to distract you. And it just came out the other day where President Trump said he is now going to start releasing and going through different steps of disclosure for the alien UFO UAP phenomena.
Oh, naturally.
Perfect time.
Perfect time.
So I'm pretty excited in a way. And I think that I have a lot of ideas on this. I'm sure you do too as well. And after listening to some of your content, I knew you'd be able to help contribute to this conversation in an excellent way. But jumping off right away, I guess, how do I want to say that? When we jump into this, I guess I want you to kind of give your take on why you think they would start using this disclosure right now. Like, why would that be a hot button?
Well, I mean, because it soothes the human logic, right? Because like you hear in a lot of atheistic camps or even just like non-believer camps, right? Like, well, how can we be the only living life forms in the entire vast galaxy, right? And a lot of people kind of use that as an argument against Christianity, right? Because how can this be true if there's probably logically and mathematically all these different living life forms out there? I think that the timing is especially suspicious because of those emails. I am of the belief that extraterrestrial life really is like extra dimensional life, right? Because it's not far from the camp of belief that God, right, is outside of time and space, outside of our dimension. Ephesians talks about a world around us unseen. So, right, like that makes sense that there would be things interdimensionally. The thing with aliens, man, I just personally, and again, this is, my personal worldview, is out of all the points in human history where they could have made themselves known, even in the modern era, why now are they coming more and more? Why is it getting leaked out more and more when I think we can all agree, like biblically, we're kind of approaching those end times and when Christ comes back? And I think it's like just a feel good blanket, and some people will cling to it to totally overlook and just overshadow the fact like our world is legitimately being run by cannibalistic Satanists. You know what I mean? And I think that's why they did it, because like it's an uncomfortable truth, right? Like, let's say all these Epstein things and some of the stuff I've talked about on my podcast in the early years about, the occult is real, Satanists exists, it's a real thing, cannibalism, sexualizing all these terrible things. It's real, and now it's happening at the highest echelons of government. Well, now what do we do? And I think the really uncomfortable truth is we can't do anything. I mean, what are you supposed to do knowing this information? What I think we should do is what God has called us to do, which is just continue to spread the gospel, share this information with people so they see the reality of the situation. Like, our government is run by the devil, right? Like Satan, the Antichrist, like the whole one world government, the whole shebang. Antichrist is going to take control eventually. And to just come to terms with that reality, even if it sounds fantastical, I think it's pretty damning evidence that those emails talk about this stuff, talk about the Satanism, the cannibalism, the occult. They believe it. They believe it because it's real. It's not like a fashion statement. You know what I mean? It's not like that's real life, man. That's real life. And I've talked about this for a long time. The entire world is being set up as a giant stage for the Antichrist. And I'm sure a lot of people, who have even just remotely read their Bible will come to that inevitable conclusion. And I think that's why they're doing it, is because it's going to soothe a lot of uncertain people who just want to gloss over this really quick, right? And just constantly just have that repeating voice in their head, like, hey, this is not real. Aliens are real. This is real. All this other stuff is all make believe. But the aliens are real. Aliens are real. Jesus and the devil not real. And it's just a comfort thing, man. That's all it is. And honestly, it shouldn't really be surprising. I know it's a bit of a buzzword now, and it's kind of like a derogatory term, but conspiracy theorists, they've been talking about aliens since the 40s. Even earlier. So it's really not surprising. And to leave you off and just, not to, I get into rambles even on other people's shows, so not to ramble too far into it. But have you ever heard of the author L.A. Marzulli?
Yes.
So I don't know if you've heard of his theory. I watched it. I watched one of his talks once, and it was super interesting. I think he's got a pretty solid point of view. I am in his camp. He has a theory that the whole basis for this alien stuff is because this will eventually work out to be like the final nail in the coffin that moves people totally out of religion. He believes that at some point, like an alien spaceship will land and all the different avatars of all the different major religions are going to appear, including Jesus. And I could see that happening. That scene, I thought if I had to put money on it, I would say that is what is going to happen.
Now, we actually had him on our show before.
Oh, nice.
And have a couple of his books up behind me, because a lot of his stuff is, I think he makes some excellent points. I mean, he takes some, and like a lot of people do in this field, we take the information we have and then he takes the next step, right? So he goes through his, it's like 18 or 19 steps of disclosure, and he tells us where we are on this disclosure ladder. And I guarantee after this stuff coming out the last couple of days, he's having a heyday making something right now.
Oh,
I guarantee he gets excited.
Vindicated, dude.
Oh yeah.
Totally vindicated.
No, but he's a good guy. But I will say in response to what you're saying, Ephesians 5:11, right? That's exactly what you said. Take no part in the worthless deeds of evil and darkness, instead expose them.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on your translation, but that's the gist of that. That's the NLT there, which is one of the translations that I think is a little bit easier for some people to read. But we're not supposed to take part of that. We step away from that stuff. And yet exactly. We expose it for what it is. It's evil. We
Mhm.
step away from that thing. We put that on the other side. That's something we will never be a part of. But if we go back to the alien side of things, we can go all the way back. You can go back even. I mean, we can talk about the ancient astronaut theory, right?
Mhm.
We go and talk about Zachariah Sitchin. You can talk about Eric
Mhm.
Van Doniken, Chariot of the Gods, right? 12th Planet by Zachariah
Mhm.
Sitchin. All these books. Actually, you did a show when you talked about the Anunkai or the
Mhm.
Anunnaki, talking a lot about Zachariah Sitchin's work,
Mhm.
where he took a lot of liberties
Oh
in
yeah.
his translations
Yeah.
of scripture to try to validate what his ideas
Mhm.
were. But if we go back and you think about Roswell and we work our way through and you see the Barney and Betty Hill and, you see these other different things that happen throughout history. And then, that Ancient Aliens TV show has been on, it's like 25 seasons or something now. It's
Wow.
something astronomical how long that's been on. And how many movies are there about aliens? How many
Mhm.
different TV shows? I mean, I go back to watching Elf. I don't know how old you are. I'm 45. I watched Elf on TV, I think before reruns. And that's the little fuzzy alien that was trying to eat the family's cat all the time. But we have been bombarded by an alien agenda, even in sitcoms and everything. Mork and Mindy, if you remember
Mhm.
Robin Williams in the beginning, we've been bombarded by this stuff for years. I mean, literally for multiple generations, and it's kind of always it's been a slow ramp up. And I think it's one of those things where the more you're exposed to something, the more comfortable you become with something, the more it doesn't surprise you, or like you said, it's a how did you say it? It just makes them comfortable.
Yeah, and it satisfies like human logic and reasoning, but the logic of God is in a lot of
Mhm.
respects beyond our understanding. So there are things you're not going to understand, I believe, and even like with the word, right? I mean, we could all speculate and have our opinions, but I think there's just some stuff we're not meant to know or to be able to make sense of completely right now, because God, Christ, is so much more than just like human reasoning and logic. He's divine. um I think I can't recall it right now. I want to say it's Deuteronomy 29:29, but it says, the secret thing, like God reveals certain things to us, but the secret things are for God, right? So there's just some stuff we're not meant to know. And I think sometimes, and I've been guilty of it too, right? In our arrogance, we try to like make sense of certain things, and then we just like we go way too far. Rather than just humbling ourselves and saying, hey, this is just like a divine mystery. This is probably not something we're going to understand right now until we're glorified with Christ. But I do agree, yeah, man. Like we have definitely, like they've been priming the pump for centuries, right? The devil was a liar from the beginning, and just yeah, priming the pump with culture, right? The devil's in Hollywood, dude. Look at the fruits of the labor of Hollywood. It's all just perversion. It's just pure evil, and it's desensitizing people to a lot of heinous stuff. Like, and not to detract, but just for example, like the Epstein stuff, talking about, the child pedophilia and the cannibal. I mean, where is like the massive outrage that there should be? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, I think that's like people are just so numb to it now, so desensitized, so beaten down. Like they're just like, oh, cool. We're run like the entire world is run by a bunch of satanistic pedophile. Like where's the outrage, right? Yeah, man. I mean, it's just they've just been priming and priming the pump for millennia, and it's going to be really hard for some people to overcome that hurdle when that first, alien entity really reveals itself.
And I do think that's coming. I think that's the
Yeah, for
ultimate
sure.
end
For
game,
sure.
right? I think that at some point we're going to have, and it's going to be one of these fallen angels,
Hmm.
these lowercase g gods from ancient times, whether it's Molech or uh, Baal, or you can go through Enki, Enlil, you can go through all these
Hmm.
different gods. Whether it's one of them that is, at that time they were called this, at some other time in history they were called this. Now they're called aliens. And I actually wanted to read that one little clip here. I should say clip, but her name is Representative Anna Paulina Luna, and she's a state representative from Florida. And she said she actually had or saw a UFO when she was in the military, and now she says that they have seen evidence of these being interdimensional beings. And I think that terminology is so appropriate, because we're talking about something that's, the spiritual realm as a whole. I mean, and we can speculate to a degree. We know God is outside of time, space, and matter, because he created it. Now, I would, to my opinion would be that the angelic realm, the spiritual realm, is outside of that as well. The heavenly realm. But when we get to heaven, we are outside of space, time. It's a whole new reality. So when we look at this and we see that members of Congress are even calling these interdimensional beings that are outside of space and time, I feel like the pieces are starting to line up. And and I'm sure you've watched some of the Ancient Alien shows in the past, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I find them very entertaining. And I feel that if you take out alien and you put angel or demon instead of in that place of that, it's actually pretty accurate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I find those shows, like, I feel like all they do is add credence to my faith, because they're just putting a different name on what I know it really is.
Yeah, that's true. And that's the thing, man. It's going to be a stumbling block for a lot of people, and look, Christians and non-Christians, we could all just be on the other side of the fence pointing back at each other, saying, oh, you want to acknowledge this evidence or that evidence, you know what I mean? But I think we as a whole in society, whatever, believer, non-believer, man, we are approaching that nexus very quickly of, like, you're just not going to be able to deny it anymore. You know what I mean? There's just, like, especially, like, let's say, for instance, just as an example of, like, how that pump has been primed of, like, secular knowledge and, like, okay, well, it's aliens and God's not real and this and that and the other. I read a book a long time ago. It was by Eliphas Levi. And he's like a big occult scientist. And, one of these books that he was writing was talking about, like that point of nothingness in space that appears, and, all matter kind of just appeared, like a singularity, right? And if you actually read, I can't remember the title of the book off the top of my head, but if you read the description of, like, this occult belief of, like, how the universe was formed, it is pretty much almost a carbon copy of the Big Bang, which came, like, hundreds and hundreds of years later. And a Jesuit priest was actually the one who formed that theory. So it's like from the very beginning, the foundation has been laid for, like, these kind of, like, secular naturalistic explanations for the universe, and, like, possibly, like, some supernatural aspect, but totally stripping God out of the whole thing, right? And you see it now, and especially with the Ancient Aliens thing, like I said, that is going to be the biggest stumbling block for people. And at some point, you're just going to have to be honest with yourself. Like, and I tell people this, I try to tell people this all the time, if you want the litmus test, like, I agree with you. At some point, it's going to happen, and we're very close to it, where they're going to reveal themselves. Just ask them, say Christ is Lord. Can this entity say Christ is Lord? Because only somebody of the Holy Spirit can say it, right? So if the argument becomes like these philosophical arguments of, like, well, maybe they don't want to say it because they don't believe, or why would they? Well, if they don't believe and their whole goal is to, convince us that they're just aliens, then why not, soothe our concerns and just say it if you don't believe in it. You know what I mean? So I really hope that anybody who is listening who may not be a believer remembers that, because that is really going to be the litmus test when this happens. Because we, like I said, we're approaching that point very, very quickly.
Test the spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's exactly what I believe they're going to be when they show up. So, I think as we kind of move I mean, I think we're moving closer to that. I think we're going to see it, a culmination of this towards the end of time. But I think that could definitely be when we see like the great deception and why many believers will fall away when we get to Revelation, that I think that might be part of it. And we talked a little bit about this before we even started recording, but the supernatural has kind of been taken out of this country, not around the world, but I see a lot of people that don't necessarily, they have belief, they believe in Jesus, they believe that he died for their sins, but they've lost the supernatural aspect of the Bible. And a lot of times, even people, if you go back through some early Christianity, like Martin Luther, he was not a big fan of the of any of these other, lowercase Psalm 82, lowercase g gods, whatever you want to call them, to the point, because he didn't want any of these gods to be put up close to where Jesus was, right? And when I say gods, I say lowercase g gods. God calls them gods in the Bible, but he says they will die like men. So we have this, and I'm sorry, this is a real big tangent. This is one of the things. This is one of the things that kind of bothers me at times is when we talk about these lowercase g, I say lowercase g gods. We can call them fallen angels, we can call them whatever, but the word God, in general, is kind of a broad term, right? You can make anything you want your God. God is just a term we put on something. When we say the one and only God, when we say Yahweh, we know who we're talking about. So I think a lot of times people, they hear that term, even when it, like Psalm 82 is what, like the prime example. And when we talk about maybe Deuteronomy 32:8, when God divided the nations among the sons of God. I mean, we see all these different rulers and principalities that are all over. And then when you talked about Ephesians 6:12, it's principalities. What are principalities? You know what I mean? They're over these different, they're gods over, or princes over these other nations all around the world. And God kept Israel as his allotment. But I see such a, I see where people have lost a lot of faith. And I think that's been kind of the part of the devil's plan in this country. I think technology has superseded the supernatural in this country. If you go to a third world country where you don't have all the TVs, you don't have all the cell phones and stuff, say we're in a tribe somewhere in middle of Africa, you're going to see actual idols like we would have seen back in the Old Testament. You're going to see people performing rituals. You're going to see, you go to Haiti, they're sacrificing things in Haiti like they used to sacrifice, not to Yahweh, not to God, but to, either their familiar spirit or to their whatever they believe in. So I see this supernatural a lot in those countries, but here we've lost that. So when something happens, when we see these supposed aliens come, that is going to cause, you said, a stumbling block. I think that is the perfect term, because this country, when they see something so amazing, they can't, and we have the first alien come down and say, you know what, look, I can take away cancer totally. I can take away any sickness you have. Boom. How easy is it going to be for someone to turn away from God and be like, yep, I'm with them. I see it right here.
And 100%.
I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's exactly what you said, is we have to steel ourselves, be ready, know that that's coming in one form or another. Even if it's not exactly in the way that I'm saying right now, there's going to be a major deception.
Oh yeah.
And we're going to fall, many believers are going to fall victim to that.
And that's why it's important to just talk about it. And it's hard too, man. Like when you talk about these supernatural events, or, when you start talking about, the occult, Satan, it makes people uncomfortable, especially like, and I'm sure you've experienced it too. I'm talking from personal experience, like we have to try to talk about that more as a normal topic of conversation, to help people, to at least give them the idea that this is a possibility. So when it does happen, it's not so shocking to the conscience. This is actually, talking about the spiritual, this is also one of the reasons, and not to go off into the weeds, but just as an example, why I've pivoted away from Protestantism. If you've never read like some of the early Orthodox ascetic monks' writings of like what they saw in the wilderness and how they were living, it'll blow your mind. And they've recaptured the spirituality that Protestantism ripped away from the Christian. And I think this is part of the problem is we've lost our way in the sense like we're so dead set on just only acknowledging what we can see, feel, and touch, and what the word of God says that soothes our like human understanding and logic of God, but we've totally ignored the the spirituality of it, right? As an example, let's say like baptism, and I'm not trying to go into the weeds with it, but for the longest time, like, a lot of people, myself included, believe baptism was just symbolic, right? But it does something to you spiritually. And one of the things that we are missing in Protestantism is the writings of the early church fathers on baptism. They believed that it did something to us spiritually. And what it did was it was that first refreshing water that washed the soul and started healing it, because they believe that we are damaged, right? We're damaged and we need the healing. And that's like the first step. And the reason I bring this up is because if you can't conceptualize that there's a spiritual aspect to this, and that the things that we do in the physical affect the spiritual, I think that's where a lot of people get lost, right? And that's why it sounds nuts. But even like, let's say like things in the occult, right? They believe that everything in the physical affects the spiritual. And the Christians believe the same thing, but they believed it correctly. They believed it in the way that God taught us and that Christ taught us. The things we do here affect the things in the world unseen. And I really think people, once they start realizing that, they're going to start coming back around, ideally before the stumbling block comes. I mean, that's my hope, but I really urge a lot of people to start like reading some of those things from these early church fathers and these ascetic monks, because I think you're going to be surprised at what you see and what you learn. Because I agree with you, technology has blinded us, right, to the possibility of the spiritual. And that's why I feel like, and what we talked about a little bit before the start of the show, why all these miracles are happening in these third world countries, because they're so in tuned with the spiritual. They've been stripped, or they've had like the materialism stripped away from them, that they only perceive now and see the spiritual, right? And this is the same reason why a lot of these ascetic monks, they unburden themselves from the yoke of the world and they go live like as hermits, basically. It does something to you, right? It does something to your soul to strip yourself of the world and to strip yourself of the materialism. And it really just reunites you with that perfect union with God, right? Your soul and God just in that perfect union. And it's a hard truth for a lot of people, nobody wants to really give up the material things we have, and we cling to them. And that's going to be another stumbling block, especially when things start getting more difficult, because they're not getting better, they're getting worse. And people really need to start acknowledging that there is a world around us unseen, and we are actively interacting with it, with our prayers, with the things that we do, with the things that we say, with the things that we pray about, and that sort of deal. Like, it really is affecting the world that is beyond this material veil.
Yeah. No, I agree. You cannot serve two masters, right? You're gonna love one or the other. You're gonna love the world, or you're gonna love God, and that's one of the big stumbling blocks. Now, I think, and you're right. I don't know how close we are. Bible talks kind of about that fig leaf generation. And I think there's been many generations that have thought they were in it. I bet you go back to the Holocaust. A lot of people thought,
sure.
World War I, World War II, that was the end of time. What any of that, it was the end of time. You go back to this different times throughout history, and this is the worst. This is awful. This is unbelievable. But technology has got us to a point where it is so much more on a global level, right? Because there was parts of the world during both, world wars that had no clue there was not anything going on. They were totally out of it. They didn't know there was no radio. It's just now you can't escape. If something major happens in this world, if, obviously when Jesus comes down out of the clouds and you hear the trumpet, everybody's going to hear it. But there's going to be something, even if it's an alien that shows themselves and says, look, this is, I am, I'm trying to think of a fun alien name, but I can't think of one anyway. Just some alien comes down and says, my name is Bob. And Bob comes down and everybody is looking at Bob like, oh my gosh. And you see this, whatever the alien portrays himself as comes down. And I would imagine they're going to come down more like, and I don't know if you've heard of all the different theories on aliens or what they have these idea of these Nordic aliens that are just beautiful and they're gorgeous. They're not like the little gray aliens or the other ones. They're kind of talk those more like they're stooges, but they have these like Nordic aliens, long, beautiful hair. And they're just these gorgeous people. And we read about how Satan looked in the Bible, right? Just gorgeous, right? You think about the one who's able to tempt you in any which way that he can. And you see this and you think, wow, an angel would be gorgeous. And they come down, you see this gorgeous being. Bob's gorgeous. And Bob's like, hey, look at this. I can heal you here. I can do this. And we start seeing that. I truly believe that's probably how it's all going to shake out. I hope that a lot of people find God. And that's why I think this is important. You're a young guy.
Thanks.
Well, I think you're younger than me. So between you and I know a few other people that I talk to are some younger podcasters, younger people that are younger authors that I've talked to, for the most part, I go to, and sorry, this is another kind of tangent. I go to different conferences and different things like this, where I love these conferences. I always get filled up. There's one up in Brookville, Ohio. I'm not sure where you're even at, but there's one up in Brookville, Ohio, every end of July. That is one of the most, I leave with my cup so full, but you get to like a lot of LA Marzulli's been at that one a couple times. There's a couple other people that come up. Derek Gilbert, if you know who Derek Gilbert is. There is just Carl Gallups, just some amazing speakers that when you leave there, you feel like you could take on Satan yourself. I mean, you just get so empowered being around those types of people. And wow, I had a really good point for this, and I totally lost my train of thought.
It happens to me all the time.
I knew you were younger than me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not too far off. You can see the gray in the beard there.
But I think, that's what it was. I'm back. All right. There's those guys at those conferences. Most of those guys are 65, 70 and up. Right. I see a lot of guys in these these realms that are much older people. And there's a big turnover coming in this next generation of people that are spreading the word, that are getting the word out there to people. And it's so important that if God's called you to do what you're doing, and I know he's called you to do what you're doing, I can tell just by the way you present yourself and the way you present your material. I know God has a calling on your life. I know God's put a calling on my life. And I think it's important for anybody out there to know there's a calling on your life too. It might not be podcasting. It might not be whatever, but it's so important that we reach as many people as we can before we get to that ultimate stumbling block. We need to help. It's like spiritual boot camp, right? We got to get ready for that end times because it's coming. Whether you like it or not. And actually the crazy part is, yes, things are getting worse and worse and worse, but that first half of that tribulation, all of a sudden everything's going to seem good. So there's going to be something that first 3.5 years, right? There's going to be something that comes that all of a sudden you're like, oh, all right, everything's great now. And that right there is when I believe that alien entity or that group of aliens, whatever it is going to show up. And all of a sudden we're going to have the cure for all these diseases. We're going to have all these amazing things happen. We're going to have materialistic pleasures and things of this nature that will just consume people.
Yeah. My view parallels yours slightly, but my difference is this, because I actually think things are going to get so bad, that's when they're going to come and give us the answers to everything and to heal exactly like you said, when we're at our lowest. And I think what they're going to say is, hey, this is our society. This is how we live. This is why everything's so perfect. You got to dump your religion. I think people who refuse to dump Christianity are going to be the ones that are getting martyred. Because in Revelations, I forgot which chapter, when the God Yahweh lifts the mercy seat and he sees the soul of all those Christians who were martyred and beheaded, I think that's going to be the result of that. Personally, I think things are going to get so freaking bad, they are going to then show themselves, fix everything, and be the knights in shining white armor and say, hey, if you guys want to live like our society lives, you got to get rid of all this religious mumbo jumbo. Use this religion. And it's going to be some conglomerate of every other major belief wrapped up into one. But when the true Christians say, nope, Christ is my Lord, they're going to say, well, look at these people. Over time, it's going to get to that point. They're just going to start pushing society into that direction of, hey, look at these people. They don't want to conform. They still believe in their fairy tale book. They don't want to live in the utopia we're giving you guys. Look, you can see how perfect everything is, how perfect we are. They're the bad ones. And if you just get rid of them, everything's going to be a lot better. And I really see that. I really see that happening personally.
I actually agree with you 100%. That I think that that'll be the turning point for when that happens. And I think about it in the way that you said it. Think about the crucifixion, right? You have a guy, Jesus, who Pilate can't even say there's anything wrong with him, but yet everybody around there is so convinced. And you have these, and I believe these, it wasn't just the Pharisees and Sadducees sitting there chanting, oh, crucify him, and trying to get everybody to get into it. I think there's the little devil on their shoulders whispering in their ears, crucify him, kill him. We want nothing to do with that. And that's how that's going to separate. You're going to have these Christians that are didn't do anything wrong, but yet society is going to see it fit for them to be murdered, for them to be killed. And just like Jesus was, and I mean, ultimately that's our fate. It's our fate. But when we get to that point, I can see it being the same way, that the society will get to that point where they feel like it is better for those Christians to be martyred, for them to be killed, even though there's nothing they can prove they did wrong other than the fact that they're Christians.
100%. I mean, it's kind of happening now, not with on the other side of the world. Yeah, it's mass persecutions. There are Christians.
Nigeria.
Yeah, exactly. Right, oh, yeah. Here, it's a cultural persecution where it's starting to get to the point where if you even mention Christ, you're basically canceled type of deal, right? Like you can't talking about Christ or mentioning anything religious with a Christian hue to it is almost seen as like, whoa, what are you, like, you're a Christian nationalist, an oppressor, this sort of thing. And it's kind of sad, man. Like a lot of people can't just look past, like, let's say Christianity has always been the counterculture to the depravity of the human will, right? Like humans have been depraved since the beginning. And even like in ancient Roman times, they were doing a lot of the stuff that is trying to be approved of now, even going up to the point of like sexualizing children, right? It wasn't uncommon in Roman times for adults to be involved with kids romantically. And it's trying to be normalized now. Christianity is what fixed it. Christianity was a counterculture that totally uprooted that whole demonic cultural system and flipped it on its head. And now, we're moving back in that direction. And, this secular society is looking at Christianity as if it's antiquated and backwards. but it's actually the opposite. You know, the old ways were antiquated and backwards. Christianity was the original morality that we were supposed to have, that we had in the garden. It was the foundation of human morality before, you know, before the fall, before it all became corrupted. And it's just, you know, and you got to pray for people like that, man, you know, and it's hard, right? It's hard sometimes, but, you know, people are lost, you know, people are clinging to the desires and the passions of the flesh rather than really like fighting it and praying to God for deliverance. And this is again why I really see it going in that direction where, you know, the Christians will eventually be blamed as the source of all problems and why nothing can be fixed. And people are just going to cling to that. And it's going to be, I really truly believe that is what's going to happen, you know, and I just pray, you know, I see some of these stories with, these martyrs in Nigeria, or even the 21 men on the beach, in, God, I forgot.
I know where you're talking. It was,
Yeah. I want to say it was like,
I know exactly what you're talking.
I don't think it was Lebanon, but you know who I'm talking, the group I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, man, I pray that I have that much bravery at that time when that, like I said, I think it's going to happen. You know, sometimes we mourn for our brothers and our sisters, or, you know, who die in early death, but man, I like to think of, I want to say it's Isaiah 52. It talks about why people die young, and God has taken them away from evil, right?
Isaiah 57:1.
57:1. Thank you. Exactly. You know, God is taking them away from evil, you know, so man, I pray that we just have the strength, if we're called to do that for Christ, that we can do it, man, because I really genuinely feel like it's going in that direction, and that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that's part of it, was that and this another problem with, I say problem, we've been very blessed to be in this country as opposed to other countries, but at the same time, it's almost a curse at one way, because we've been so comfortable, right?
Yeah.
You look at the bravery of those 21 men on the beach, and they most likely did not live great lives. They most likely were, you know, and I'm not, to be honest, I don't know, I'm speculating, but if you look at Nigeria, places like that, they're in very difficult situations before all that happens. And you look at a lot of these third world countries, life is not great. I've been to, you know, I've heard people here talk about, oh, we're poor here, you know, these different areas, different neighborhoods. It's so poor here. And I was in China back in 1996. I went to China. I was in China and Hong Kong for a little bit. It was actually the only mission trip I've ever been on, which is actually, strangely, I had to go on a mission trip to actually find God myself. So I went on a mission trip and actually probably ended up being the one that was saved. So if it's crazy story for another time.
Nice.
But but buddy, I've seen God work in ways that I can't even put into words. It's pretty amazing. But sitting over in China, Hong Kong, you know, the big city, you know, it's the business capital of the world. And this is actually the last year Great Britain had a lease on Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is still pretty nice. It's under British rule. It went back in, I think it was July 1st, 1997 to China. We went into mainland China, and this is at a point when I believe you were allowed to bring Bibles across the border, because we did. And we brought Bibles into China and went around. And I remember going to a city, and it's actually not far from all this COVID stuff supposedly started. We were in, is it Guangzhou or Canton, southern China, very industrial. And we were walking down the street, and I can't, if you put it in a movie, you wouldn't believe it, right? I saw, and you've heard of stuff like this, but I saw people just sleeping pretty much everywhere on the street, on the sidewalks. I saw a guy holding onto a stop sign, just taking a crap on the road right there. I saw people peeing in the gutters. Everything smelled like urine. But the worst thing that I've ever seen in my life is the gutters of the street were at least this deep with heroin needles.
Wolf.
And then when you got up inside a house and we looked across the roofs were covered in heroin needles. I mean, I'm not joking. Like,
I believe it. I've heard it before.
But you couldn't put that in a movie and no one would believe you. And it was as far as you could see down the road. That was those people's only escape. That's how poor and how destitute that place was. I don't know where they get it. I mean, it might be opium, whatever it is, whatever they're doing. It was needles and it was going in them. And it was bad because I just saw the poorest of the poor. I saw cardboard cities. I saw just things that you can't even put into words. These people never had another change of clothes. They never had, most of them didn't have shoes. But I've seen very, very poor. And those people, I've also seen people in that situation that have been the happiest people in the world. They're poor and they're happy because they have Jesus. They have God in their lives. So when you go through that and you can be at the very bottom and have Jesus pull you out of that, that's awesome. But for us, that's one gift we don't have. I mean, it sounds bad. It sounds like, yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm in this house right now and I'm comfortable. And I've never been, we were not too well off as kids, but I was never, ever like, my parents didn't have something for me to eat.
Yeah.
I've never had to deal with that. So in this country, I'm very concerned for all those people who have gotten to that comfort level, because it's actually almost a curse. And I know there's a lot of people that are not as well off that would look at me and say, you're just an idiot for saying that because you've had this. But what this world has to offer is not what I want.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we get everybody in this country, the people who are so comfortable living that life, to realize that the things of this world are not what we should be focused on?
Well, that's the thing. You don't, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Is we can only kind of point them in that direction. Well, you really have to come to this realization on your own. I mean, genuinely, because, you can share all the testimony you want. You can share all the evidence, but if somebody's unwilling to acknowledge it or to let it go, I mean, you know what I mean? Like what more can you possibly do? I am of the belief that the best you can do is, again, the Great Commission. Spread the word, tell people about it, talk about it. Your hands are clean, because it's really up to them. You can't convince somebody who doesn't want to be convinced. You can't control somebody's perceptions or their emotions. Like they have to have that encounter with Christ themselves. They have to come to that realization themselves. And the sad reality is a lot of people won't. You know what I mean? Because and it's like we said at the beginning of this podcast, something was lost with our materialism and our modernization. Not that it's bad, but that we've replaced reliance on God with reliance on ourselves and material wealth. I really like, and I've been looking at it a lot more recently, the story, like, let's say Abraham and Solomon, right? Those are probably the two biggest ones. They had and we'll go with Job too, they had a lot of material wealth and God blessed them materially, but their hope was not connected to their material wealth, right? They acknowledged that God owns it all and gifted it to them, but their heart wasn't in that. It was in what is promised to come. And I think that's where the real disconnect is. It's like, it's cool to have all these things, and it's cool to, have a house and all these comfortable things and be materially blessed, but it's really not the end all be all, because when we die, we can't take any of this with us. This is all nice, but it's fruitless. It's just like, but how do you convince somebody of that? You can't. Like, they have to come to that realization themselves. We can only give them information and the tools, but we'll never convince somebody who doesn't want to let go of it. And that's really the key. Like, Abraham, Solomon, they were all detached from the wealth because they solely relied on God, and they believed in God, and they believed in the promise to come, and that's where their heart was. That's what they focused on. And we all have free will. So if somebody doesn't want to acknowledge it, I mean, it kind of just, I know it sounds really bad, but it is what it is. I mean, that's why you have to pray for these people. That's why you have to try your best, even if it's awkward sometimes, to, talk to them about these topics, share your testimony about what you saw in some of these really destitute countries, let them hear what reality is for some people in the world, right? Like, not the whole world doesn't live like this, and the whole world doesn't lose hope just because they don't have material wealth. And, God willing, they'll let themselves see it, or God will help them see it. But yeah, man, I mean, that's really all you can do is just share it and talk about it, and just pray that they just acknowledge it, man.
That's right. We plant those seeds, right?
Mhm.
We're not ultimately the one that's going to reap. We're the one
Correct.
that plants the seeds, and
Yep.
and the cool
God
part.
waters.
Well, and that's the cool part, though, right? The cool
Mhm.
part is God doesn't really need us. He doesn't.
You're right. Yeah.
He allows us to be part of the plan, and that to me is the coolest thing. Is like, getting picked first for kickball. Like, God's like, you're in, man. Get out there. And I love that. I absolutely love it. It makes me happy to think about it that way. Is that God allows me to be part of His plan in somebody else's salvation story, right? And that's the thing. How many people in my life am I going to be able to say that I was part of someone's salvation story? I think. Not saying that because you're never the end all be all. You're never the one that says, yes, you are converted. That just doesn't happen that way. We plant seeds. People have to make up their own decision. You're right, 100%. But man, if we're not planting those seeds, you sit there, and I think the most tense moment that you will ever go through is when you're walking up to Jesus and you're waiting to hear, is he going to say, well done, good and faithful servant? Or he's going to say, please exit left. You know what I mean?
Stage left.
Yeah, stage left. So that's what I'm talking about. I want to make sure that I plant all the seeds that I possibly can. I'll tell you this. I've said this before, and I've said this on these shows before, but my mom always told me, she prays a prayer every morning. She said, God, put someone in my path today that I can reach for you. And she says, even more importantly, please don't let me miss it.
Wow.
Please don't let me miss it. And I think that's such a powerful thing to think. God uses you. He allows you to be part of it. And then you can pray to him and say, God, put me in, coach, let me play. and he does. And I think that's the most amazing thing. And I think all these things that we talked about tonight, all these things where we see these potential, scary futures, things that are coming, I think it's so important that we continue to focus on the main thing, and that we have to not only strengthen, our own faith and by being in the Word, by prayer, by all these things, but we're called, iron sharpens iron. We're called to help sharpen the rest of the church. We're called to help sharpen the rest of other believers, and we need to all strengthen each other and be in unity as we get closer to the end.
Absolutely. And, like I said, I think the real important aspect of that too is to never feel like you're laboring in vain, even if you have like a short conversation with somebody about Christ or the gospel. And even if they don't want to listen, man, just dropping that little seed on the path, God can use that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he'll know you by your fruits. So, it's easy for us to talk the talk sometimes, but we got to walk the walk too.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying I'm always a vision of perfection in that area.
Of course. Yeah. I'm definitely not. It's definitely my struggle, is sharing it with people. I don't know why, honestly, man. I sometimes I hate when I miss those opportunities, and I've missed them, I've prayed on, I'm like, Lord, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm a fool, But yeah, man, sometimes I don't know why, where the apprehension comes from. Yeah, I don't know, but it's just, praying to God for the strength to work through it, And
I think that every one of those things, because we're not the only one out there, and I always believe that, yeah, I've missed some opportunities, but God will send another person on that path, or he'll bring them back to me, and then I won't miss it the next time. But I think we have to just keep focusing on that. We have to keep pushing forward. And every one of these trials that we go through, every one of these tribulations or these other opportunities that God gives us, all it is strengthening us for the end. Even in the bad times, Romans 5:3-5 talks about, praise God the bad times, because endurance develops character. Character develops our stronger hope in the salvation that God gives us. And I know I butchered that verse, but it's to that effect. So I think that's just, man, I love it. I love talking with people like you because it fills my cup too. I love these kind of conversations. Yeah, man. So everybody out there listening, make sure you go and listen to Luca on the Justified Belief podcast. Dig into his stuff. It spans quite a gamut. There's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, it's all the way from salvation to Satanists. There's a little bit of everything in there. Like I said, I just listened to that episode on the Anunnaki, which I think was an excellent episode, and the also the freedom that we can find in Jesus is that episode that you did. I can't remember the exact episode, or the exact name of it, but it was what is true freedom? Freedom in Jesus.
How does Jesus set us free?
Yes, that exactly. That is such a good episode, so well put together. And I think it could answer a lot of questions for people out there if you want to truly look at how the world around us views freedom versus the way that we as Christians view freedom. So thank you so much, Luca, for coming on, man.
Oh, no, Steve. Thanks for having me, man. I'm right there with you. I love having the conversation with people, especially guys like you who, you can share alternate points of view and differences of opinion without getting offended, man. That's huge. Some people, they take things personal. It's nothing personal, man. Everybody sees things from a different point of view. Everybody has a different life experience. We inevitably kind of come up to our different conclusions. The part of like talking with people is to, argue different points of view and try to convince people that your point of view is right, but don't get offended, don't get mad. So I hope to do it again in the future, man.
Oh, we'll get together again for sure, man. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Substack. If you'd like to reach out and ask a question or just leave a general comment, go to againsttheherdpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.